I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Christine Romans in for Savannah. We begin in the Middle East this morning, where the Israeli military announced just a few hours ago that a ceasefire agreement in Gaza is now in effect. IDF tanks could be seen moving along Israel's border with the enclave earlier today, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says forces will remain in Gaza to put pressure on Hamas. The announcement comes after the Israeli government approved the first phase of the peace plan yesterday. This phase includes pause in fighting, and then the release, of course, of the remaining hostages in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian prisoners.
Celebrations broke out across Gaza and Israel yesterday as peace in the region begins to take shape. President Trump says he expects the hostages to be released as early as Monday or Tuesday. 48 hostages remain in Gaza. 20 of them are believed to still be alive. President Trump and his administration played a key role in brokering this deal. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, met with Netanyahu yesterday and sat in on that cabinet meeting where the agreement was approved. This week marked 2 years since Hamas attacked Israel, launching this conflict. On that day in 2023, 250 hostages were captured. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about what changed for both sides that led them to agree to this deal with Dr. Krishan Baskin, a former hostage negotiator. First, let's get to NBC News International correspondent Matt Bradley. He's on the ground for us in Tel Aviv. Matt, good morning. Now that the IDF has announced the ceasefire is in effect, does it appear to be holding? And just what is the rest of this first phase going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, it appears to be holding at the moment, and we're actually seeing, according to agencies, thousands and thousands of Palestinians now moving from southern Gaza back to their homes in northern Gaza, where they had been told to leave. That was some of the focus of some of the worst fighting for the past 2 years. So Palestinians are actually returning home. Some of them displaced 4, 5, 6, 7 times over the course of this war. Now they finally have the confidence, and this is crucial, the confidence in this process to actually walk home. That's a big step. So it shows that the people on the ground, the Palestinian people in Gaza, believe that the ceasefire will hold enough to take the risk to walk north. So it does look like this is something that is actually going to happen, which is surprising for those of us who have been watching this for a while. There have been so many false starts, and now there's so much optimism and so much pressure around this deal that it really looks as though it is just colliding towards the final finish. Now, we don't know whether or not this could hold. We don't know what could go wrong. At any time, this could be both in the negotiations in Egypt and on the ground in Gaza. But, Joe, for now, it looks as though we're seeing some success.
And, Matt, the U.S. military is preparing to deploy around 200 troops to Israel. This is according to 2 U.S. officials familiar with that planning. What would the U.S. role be in the region?
Well, certainly it doesn't sound like the U.S. really wants to get involved in Gaza, in the fighting. That's definitely something that they've been trying to do, trying to avoid. We saw even with, all of the efforts they made to try to create that dock that would dock against the Gaza Strip and provide aid. You remember this from last year, a hugely expensive project, all just to avoid putting U.S. boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip. Now that there's a ceasefire, according to the White House, it sounds as though this is going to be about logistics. This is about coordinating access to aid, which is much needed in the Gaza Strip, and there's still a lot of outstanding questions about that, even though Donald Trump's 20-point plan says that aid will flow in unimpeded once the ceasefire begins, and it sounds as though the ceasefire has begun, so we should be seeing aid coming in. But, this is going to be a light roll with a light touch, that, according to the White House sources who revealed this news to NBC, but it doesn't necessarily, events could change what the role is. We're talking about 200 soldiers on the ground. That could change again with the ceasefire, with the events on the ground. That could change at any moment. This is all still so sensitive.
And Matt, President Trump says he's planning to travel to the Middle East soon. What do we know so far about this trip and just what is next in this 20-point peace plan?
Well, I'll tell you, Joe, straight away, he is going to get a rapturous hero's welcome. I was in Hostages Square last night, all day yesterday, and man, everybody just is talking about President Donald Trump. They're wearing, American flag suits. There was a guy with a saxophone who was playing the national anthem. People are just talking with such gratitude about the U.S. president. It's unlikely that the president is going to want to avoid making a victory lap, considering the circumstances. He said that he's going to be going to the Middle East for the signing ceremony for this deal, which is taking place in Egypt. And then it sounds like he's going to be coming here the following couple of days, possibly to speak to the Knesset.
All right. Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you so much.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in the co-head of the Alliance for Two States, Dr. Gershon Baskin. He's also the Middle East director of the International Organization and a former hostage negotiator. Dr. Gershon, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You know, there have been several instances in this conflict where a ceasefire deal seemed to be on the table, then they couldn't find common ground to agree to them. What finally changed here, do you think, that allowed Israel and Hamas to agree this time around?
I think the major change took place after the failed Israeli attack on the Hamas leadership in Doha in Qatar, where subsequently President Trump needed to dissociate himself from that attack, saying that the United States had nothing to do with it, and was then under pressure to prove that the United States was a fair broker here and wanted to bring out a deal. We witnessed Prime Minister Netanyahu coming to the UN General Assembly meeting and then coming to the Oval Office, where President Trump handed Netanyahu a phone to call the Qatari Prime Minister to apologize for the Israeli attack. That was completely scripted by President Trump. Then when the journalist and the cameras left the room, Trump told Netanyahu that the time to end the war was now. And he was given no choice about it. This was a demand from President Trump. It came following Trump's buying into Netanyahu's narrative that Israel could bring Hamas to its knees to surrender. It became clear that that was not going to happen, and President Trump decided that American interests in the region are more important than allowing Netanyahu to continue the war.
So, Dr. Baskin, as we've said, the White House thinks the remaining hostages could be released as soon as Monday. The hostages have been Hamas's primary leverage throughout this conflict. Years. Does this mean Hamas has little to no leverage moving forward? I mean, what does this mean now as this process moves forward with phase one and then potentially other phases after that?
Well, it's important to know that Hamas has already, for a year, said they're willing to give up all the hostages. Even I brought a written agreement from Hamas in September of 2024, indicating that they would. But what they demanded was an end to the war and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. And the Israelis were not willing to end the war at that point, and President Biden didn't force Israel to end the war. This is a major point of leverage for Hamas, but Hamas is decimated. Hamas has no political leadership left in Gaza. Their military leadership is third, fourth, fifth level of officers there. Hamas is going to have to reevaluate their whole existence as what they call a resistance movement and figure out what their new role is going to be, because I think that most Palestinians understand, most people in the Middle East understand that they are not going to get a free Palestinian state by killing Israelis. This is a failed strategy. It brought decimation on the Gaza Strip, on the people of Gaza. 2 million people who are homeless today. Those people that your report talked about moving from the south to the north of Gaza are going to get to their homes and find out that they don't exist anymore. They're going to see piles of rubble. And this is really tragic for the more than 2 million people of Gaza. There needs to be a whole reevaluation here about how we move forward. And I think that President Trump and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and others have already been talking about it. Phase 2 of this deal is already on the table, and most of the issues have solutions. It just needs to be finalized still.
Let's talk about the hostages. They've been in captivity for more than 700 days. Obviously, they're going to need a lot of support once they're released. What should their families prepare for, do you think?
Well, their families are preparing to hug their loved ones for the first time in 2 years after they've not slept for 2 years. It's really amazing. Yesterday was the first time in 2 years that we actually saw Israelis smiling. Many of the mothers of hostages have said that I feel like the moment before giving birth again. The Israeli medical system is up to speed, ready to take care of all these people. They're going to have to be dealt with, each one individually, with their own needs, their nutritional needs. They're going to go through a very long psychological recovery process that will take a long time. And we have to recognize that not only the hostages themselves have this psychological trauma that they've lived with, it's their families, their loved ones, their surroundings, everyone who knows them, the entire country. We have 2 people now who have gone through extreme trauma, and we don't have the medical health services that can deal with us in Israel, where our system is 1,000,000 times better than in Gaza, and the Gazans have no medical health, no mental health system to deal with the trauma that they're experiencing there.
Certainly a very historic moment we're seeing here right now, Dr. Gershon Baskin. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
New York Attorney General Letitia James is now the latest Trump adversary to face criminal charges. James was indicted by a federal grand jury yesterday, 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of making false statements to a financial.
James, who is a Democrat, successfully sued Mr. Trump, his sons, and the Trump Organization with fraud last year. She secured a near $500 million civil judgment against his real estate empire. An appeals court later tossed out the fine, but upheld the court's finding of liability. Since then, James has become a target for President Trump, who has publicly called for the Justice Department to bring charges against her. James, of course, strongly denies any wrongdoing.
Here to talk about this, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley and our legal analyst, Danny Ceballos. Good morning to both of you. Ryan, let's start with you. So why were these charges brought against AG James? What are the prosecutors alleging in this indictment?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest reason that the charges were brought, it seems, is because Donald Trump wanted her to be charged. And we know that because, as the Wall Street Journal first reported and as NBC News has confirmed, that there was a publicly posted message in which Donald Trump encouraged charges to be brought against James Comey, the Attorney General, as seen on the screen here, as well as Adam Schiff, who has not yet been charged with any crime. Essentially, Donald Trump is laying out and sort of breaking a lot of these norms with this direct relationship between the White House and the Justice Department. This all revolves around a loan over the course of which, over 30 years, she would have potentially gained about $18,000 or saved about $18,000 because the property that she's alleged to have purchased here was, she said it was going to be a personal property and ended up using it as an investment property. So that works out to about $500 a year overall. And obviously she has made explicitly clear that she thinks these are political charges.
Yeah, because you can get a lower interest rate if it's a primary residence than if it's a rental residence. And that's kind of a routine filing there. Danny, let me bring you in. You've seen this indictment. What do you make of it? And does it seem like prosecutors have a good case here?
Well, good case is an interesting concept. By good, that may mean that it's a provable case, but sometimes a case is provable that shouldn't have been brought in the first place because it may be hyper-technical or something like that. Here's what I mean. The allegations appear provable, and by that I mean if she executed the second rider where she says, I will not use this as a rental property, I will use it, as you just pointed out, and I know you have some familiarity with this, I will use it as a secondary home, well, that will be easy to prove. And then the question of did she use it as an investment property, that too will be relatively easy to prove. However, that doesn't mean this is a case that should have been brought. As Ryan pointed out, the alleged loss in the indictment is about $18,000. The median loss for these kinds of mortgage fraud crimes, as you probably know, is on the order of $370,000. That's the usual dollar amount that you might, or the median dollar amount that we're dealing with. So is this a case that should have been brought? Because there are plenty of cases that can be proven, but that shouldn't be brought. We don't see a mass prosecution of jaywalking, even though jaywalking obviously goes on every day. We have plenty of cameras. We could prosecute it if we wanted to. So this is a case that may be something that the government can prove ultimately, but it may not be a case that should have been brought.
So, Ryan, like former FBI Director James Comey, Letitia James knew an indictment was a possibility here, so she was bracing for a fight. But how is she responding to these charges now that they're here?
Yeah, she responded pretty swiftly. She actually put out this video on social media saying that this was Donald Trump going after his political enemies. Take a listen.
This is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding. These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost.
So the interesting thing here, of course, as as Danny well knows, is that this could be a case where they could basically say that this was a vindictive prosecution, and they've the Trump administration has given a lot of material for defense attorneys to work with along those lines. But overall, I think they've succeeded in getting what I think Donald Trump wanted the most, which was these headlines about Ms. James, as well as, putting her through this legal process, which of course is probably going to be very expensive for her and may end up being sort of a process that equals a punishment regardless of how this case turns out.
So, Danny, what kind of sentence could James face if found guilty, and what kind of defense do you think she'll mount?
Yeah, so I did a back of the envelope assessment using the $18,000 because with bank fraud, everything is driven by the loss amount. You don't normally have loss amounts this low. They go down as low as $6,000 under the federal sentencing guidelines, to give you an idea. So she's not at the bottom, but she's very close to the bottom. And roughly, you're looking at a guidelines range. There are a lot of different factors, but anywhere from 6 to 10 months or 8 to 14. When you have that kind of guideline range, and I'll just give you an example, I've never had a federal criminal case, where the guidelines were that low. You've got a very good shot at a probation-only sentence. So in the world of seriousness of crimes, I put this on the low end of federal criminal crimes because, federal crimes are usually dealing with decades in prison.
All right, Ryan and Danny, thank you both. Appreciate it.
All right, this morning, National Guard troops on the ground near Chicago could be heading home. It comes after a federal judge issued a temporary restraining order against the Trump administration yesterday. The order blocks the deployment of troops to the city and state for now, finding that the president's directive violates the Constitution. The judge also criticized the Department of Homeland Security in her order, accusing the agency of using, quote, unreliable evidence to validate its claims of increased violent crime. DHS has not yet commented on this ruling. In
a statement, the White House responded, saying President Trump will not turn a blind eye to the lawlessness plaguing American cities, and we expect to be vindicated by a higher court. Both Chicago's mayor and Illinois' governor, both Democrats, praised the judge's ruling. The governor posted on X, saying in part, Donald Trump is not a king, and his administration is not above the law.
As the legal battle over National Guard troops goes on, the U.S. is now in day 10 of the government shutdown. It is now expected to drag on to the 2-week mark.
It comes after the Senate rejected 2 partisan funding bills yesterday. Once again, the next vote to try and reopen the government is scheduled now for Tuesday.
NBC News correspondent Melanie Zanona is live on Capitol Hill with the latest for us. Mel, good morning. As the GOP continues to blame the Democrats for the shutdown, President Trump now threatening to permanently cut what he calls popular Democratic programs. His administration has already slashed more than $20 billion in funding in places like New York and Chicago for infrastructure and climate-related projects. What kind of programs is he referring to? And can he even do that without input from Congress?
Well, the executive branch does actually have the authority to determine who and what is essential versus non-essential in the event of a shutdown. What is far less clear from a legal perspective is whether he has the authority to make those changes permanent. But he has not stopped using these threats as sort of a cudgel against Democrats. He hasn't been entirely clear about what he plans to do, but we have seen that so far the programs that he's been freezing are in blue states. I just want you to take a listen to what he said yesterday about this.
We're cutting some very popular Democrat programs that aren't popular with Republicans, frankly, because that's the way it works. They wanted to do this, so we'll give them a little taste of their own medicine.
Now, Democrats say this is just a intimidation tactic and that he's trying to bully them essentially into folding. That has not happened yet. And there is some behind the scenes reporting here that Republicans don't love the idea of either permanently firing federal workers or another threat that Trump has levied, which is not giving federal workers back pay. There are worries that this could really backfire for Trump, so he has not carried through on some of these threats, but clearly he's trying to up the stakes as much as possible as this shutdown drags on.
So, Mel, today's Friday. That's payday for a lot of folks, yet many federal employees who get their paychecks through direct deposit are going to miss them for the first time today since the shutdown began. I mean, Democrats, they're refusing to budge on the health care funding demands with Republicans. Well, here we go. NBC News now has obtained new polling data on public opinion. It appears to support Democrats' stance on health care subsidies. Talk about how public opinion might be shifting or changing as this shutdown moves on.
Well, the opinions are an ever-evolving thing, but what we know from the latest polling is that Democrats appear to have a slight edge in the shutdown fight. More people are blaming President Trump and Republicans slightly for the shutdown. And also, interestingly, as my colleagues reported in that story you showed there, the Senate Democrats got a briefing this week from a pollster who said health care is really resonating with people. That, of course, has been one of the top demands for Democrats. They want any funding deal to include an extension of Obamacare subsidies. And so that is really encouraging Democrats to dig in and keep fighting on this. They feel like they have the upper hand. And meanwhile, there's some evidence that Republicans are recognizing this could be a vulnerability for them, too. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Trump's top allies in Congress, has come out pretty strongly and directly calling on her party to negotiate on this issue and to not let those subsidies expire. So this has been just a hot debate on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, Republicans criticize Obamacare, but that's why kids after, up to 26 can still get health care, and that is, or health insurance, and that's Marjorie Taylor Greene, two of her kids. House Speaker Mike Johnson joined C-SPAN Live yesterday, Mel, to take questions from callers about the shutdown. Listen to this conversation he had with one Republican voter.
I'm begging you to pass this legislation. My kids could die. We don't have the credit because of the medical bills that I have to pay regularly. You could stop this, and you could be the one that could say military's getting paid. And I think that it is awful, and the audacity of someone who makes six figures a year to do this to military families is insane.
If you're in the military, you're going to miss a paycheck on October 15th if the government is still shut down. That's next week. How did the Speaker respond? How will he bring the House back in session?
Yeah, that was such a powerful moment. And you don't typically see lawmakers, especially speakers, go on C-SPAN taking calls from everyday Americans like that. But Johnson was very empathetic. He said, I totally understand. But he also said that the House already did its job by passing that stopgap spending bill back in September. And then he had a press conference just a few hours after that moment on C-SPAN where he continued to dig in and say, we're not going to pass a standalone bill to pay the troops because the House already did its job. So as of right now, there are no plans for Congress to try to take up a standalone bill. I think the hope among Republicans is that Democrats are going to feel the heat more than them and try to eventually come to some sort of deal. There are no signs of that happening right now. So all signs point to the fact that the members of the military are going to miss their first paycheck on Wednesday. And then, of course, federal workers already missing their first paycheck today, guys.
All right, Melanie Zanona, thank you so much.
People up and down the Atlantic coast are bracing for a weekend of potentially rough weather, from powerful winds and heavy rain in the northeast to tidal flooding in the southeast. NBC News correspondent George Solis has the latest from Miami.
Good morning. 60 million people from the eastern Great Lakes to New England already bracing for those frigid fall-like temperatures. And here in the south, we're also bracing for the potential of severe weather with those high tides potentially bringing some flooding to the area, all as that nor'easter makes its way up the east coast. Now, some states we're going to be looking at very closely. South Carolina, they have been hammered with some severe weather already this season. And already we saw some flooding in the downtown Charleston area. And some of those frigid temperatures already settling in overnight. If you were up late watching the Giants take on the Philadelphia Eagles in New Jersey, you saw some of the fans there in the stands bundled up for those frigid temperatures. That's going to potentially carry on into the weekend. And our friends out west not catching much of a break either, with the remnants of Hurricane Priscilla expected to dump some rain up to an inch an hour in portions of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and portions of Colorado. So a lot of activity happening across the map here. But again, if you're looking at what to expect here back on the East Coast, again, we're already here in South Florida seeing some thunder and some lightning. We're expecting to get some rain here today, but again, all focus seems to be on the Carolinas. And again, as that nor'easter makes its way up into portions of the Northeast and New England where that cold temperature could set in. I mean, a lot of folks have, are ready for those seasonal temperatures to pick up, and this is probably the coldest snap it's been since we began the season here. But again, we're going to be very much keeping an eye on the rain there, where again, some of those flood threats could be really serious, where you already saw some storm preps taking place in portions of New Jersey, making sure that the flooding really doesn't get any much more severe than we have seen in seasons past. Back to you.
All right, George, thank you.
Okay, our storm coverage continues with another look at what's ahead for this weekend of potentially wild weather.
Morning News Now weather with meteorologist Angie Lassman. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Unfortunately, George kind of laid it out for you that we're going to be looking at busy conditions up and down the East Coast through the weekend. Here's what we've got right now. A massive kind of rain sitting just offshore for folks across Florida. But notice some of that is kind of fading into the coastal areas. So we're going to be in and out of these showers down through the Keys and up through parts of Georgia and even the Carolinas through the day today. But then we're going to wait and watch to see if we can get this low to develop just off the coast there as we get into the evening hours tonight. And then eventually into tomorrow, we've got a big push of rain working into the Carolinas and parts of the mid-Atlantic. This is going to bring us those really strong onshore winds. We'll see the heavy rain, of course, and we'll be watching for the coastal flooding across this region for your Saturday. As we look ahead to your Sunday, all of that works farther up the coast, and we've got more of this rain and really all all of those impacts working into parts of the Northeast, and they're here to stay. We'll see the beach erosion. We'll see some power outages. All of that is going to be on the table for your weekend. And then by Monday, we're still seeing this storm kind of linger just offshore. So the showers, the winds, those will all be in the picture here as we get started for our next work week. But the worst of it will be focused from Virginia to Maine by Monday. So let's lay out some of those specific impacts. Let's start with the winds. Those are going to be most impactful the closer to the coast you are. So that's where you'll see the highest of those winds. And notice peak wind gusts anywhere from 40 to 50, close to 60 miles per hour along the Delmarva and Jersey coast. You'll see Atlantic City likely topping out at about 57 miles per hour as we get through the weekend. So down trees, power outages, air travel, of course, going to be difficult. High-profile vehicles on the roadways is going to be difficult when it comes to driving. And then we'll see that likely last through the next couple of days. On the coastal flooding part of this, we're going to see those northeast winds shove all that water into the coast. So you'll notice we've already got some minor and moderate and even major flooding occurring. And Atlantic City could potentially look at near record level for flooding by the time we get to the middle of the day on Sunday. So this is going to be something that's a prolonged kind of multiple day event, guys. We'll see this lasting. And on top of the flooding with all that rain working up against the coast, we've also got some heavy rain and some flooding that we're going to see. This is a long duration event, as I mentioned. Saturday all the way to Tuesday, we'll see those localized areas of flooding, the streets that you often see flooding, but anywhere from 3 to 5+ inches of rain in a short amount of time, not great. Of course, overwhelming our systems to get rid of that flood water. It's going to be something that we'll watch through the weekend.
That's a lot of rain. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Angie.
There'll be
Appreciate
some
it.
canceled soccer games this
I think so. I think so. Or some muddy ones.
Exactly.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.